I do want to point out the downgrade didn't have anything to do with with Netflix physique. So when they talk about overweight, that's not like their body mass index or anything like that. They said before you would overweight that stock in your portfolio, and now they're neutral. Just if somebody was offended by that, thinking that J.P. Morgan was fat shaming Netflix.
Today on Business Lunch, we're going to talk about the subscription economy bust, why Netflix's downgrade signals the end of an era. So Netflix just got downgraded by JP Morgan from overweight in your portfolio to neutral. And the company that created the subscription economy, Netflix, basically is credited for doing that, is now facing its own subscription reality check. What does this mean for the thousands of businesses that are built on the recurring revenue dream? And that's something that we've talked about. We're going to break it down today on Business Lunch. Ryan, how you doing?
Oh, so dang good. I do want to point out the downgrade didn't have anything to do with with Netflix physique. So when they talk about overweight, that's not like their body mass index or anything like that. They said before you would overweight that stock in your portfolio, and now they're neutral. Just if somebody was offended by that, thinking that J.P. Morgan was fat shaming Netflix.
Interesting that actually it's fat aggrandizing. I think when they recommend that they're favoring the overweight in their portfolio selection.
But in this case, they're like, stop being overweight.
They're skinny
shaming
them down. Actually, if you think about it.
Exactly.
All right. No. That said, so do you feel like Netflix started the subscription gold rush?
I mean, it was funny. You said that, and I was trying to think. I guess it seems like it all sort of happened all at once around the time when
was Prime before that. Because I feel like Prime was the real big subscription, thing.
Maybe because Prime is annual and Netflix is monthly. That's sort of why they're getting credit for it. And when we think about subscription, we tend to think about MRR more than ARR. More than the annual. So perhaps that's why it all seemed to happen at once when everybody decided that it was okay to finally buy online. And I remember when that happened. I remember when I first started selling online. And this again, 1999, 2000, launching my first business online. One of the biggest questions that we would get from people is, how do I know this is legitimate? How do I know you're not going to steal my credit card? And then it was like overnight, all of those questions just stopped. And that was around the
Amazon
time
primarily was responsible for that.
I think so. Yeah, there was a tipping point with Amazon. And as soon as that happened, then it's like everybody realized, wait a minute, we could sell people once and charge them over and over and over and over and over again. And Netflix, I think, was one of the first, was definitely one of the first to do it.
Yeah, and the argument in the article and the content that kind of spurred this discussion was that there had been three phases. The gold rush from 2010 to 20 was everybody could launch a subscription business. Investors, we've been talking about this, since then. We met with lots of private equity firms that were saying, we love recurring revenue. The multiples are going to be higher. SaaS multiples went, to the moon and beyond. And at the time, that 2010 to 20, I would argue that customer acquisition was relatively cheap. Do you agree that that's kind of the gold rushy period and that those things are true, or do you have pushback?
I feel like it ended before 2020, but maybe that's just in some of the markets that we were in. It seemed to get really
die in like 2018.
Yeah, 2018. I was thinking the same thing up until about 2016. 2016, it felt really easy. 2017, it was still kind of there. 2018 was when it got particularly hard. I remember it was in 2015 when we met with the big muckety muck private equity firm, and they said, "Oh, you've got these courses and certifications. Instead of selling them a la carte for hundreds and thousands of dollars, you should just put them all in a members area and sell them for a monthly subscription." And we did that. And we almost went out of business a couple of months later.
Don't forget that pesky cash flow that was all coming in front.
Yeah. I mean, and I do think that net it worked out. But then fast forward, what did we wind up doing post-COVID? Basically shifting back to a la carte. So for
So that's
for
it.
this very
That's the
reason.
saturation phase. They're saying is 2020 to 24. Every consumer has 5 to 12 active subscriptions, and I even for me, like, I want to subscribe to things and have access to all the goodies, but you start looking at 10 or 20 29, 39, 59, $99 a month subscriptions and more coming at you all the time. You're like, man, I don't think so. And especially in entertainment, like, or news, like, to read this article, that was the reason that I think Google should be shot and drug out in the street, is that you search for information and they give you paywalled results. So you click and it's Bloomberg. And now I go to read the article on Bloomberg and it's like, sign up for the subscription. And the subscription's not cheap. And I'm like, you just wasted my time, because I don't want another subscription, certainly not to read this article that I can probably find the information free elsewhere. And I think that's like part of this whole subscription thing ultimately destroyed the integrity of Google as a search machine, and at the same time made everyone say, I've got too many as it is, and so I don't want any more. Just like, I can't afford it, or it bugs me. And also how difficult it was to cancel subscriptions, because playing the hide the cancel game, was also a big thing. So I think you had subscription fatigue, and then customer acquisition costs went up. Well, I think they went down initially during the pandemic and then up, but that 20 to 24, I'd call the pandemic recovery period. Would you
Yeah, and
also?
really, it was in 2020 when I think we were getting subscription fatigue and things were kind of dipping starting in 2018 and going into 2020. And then when the pandemic happened and everybody's at home, you've got Substack launching, and it seems like everybody then, because they were at home, everybody's like, okay, give me all the subscriptions, because if there's one thing I got, it's freaking time.
Time and
Time to
money
consume all
from incentives and loans and
Exactly. So I think what we saw was a resurgence in the subscription economy in 2020 going into 2021 that really was kind of bubble part 2 that wouldn't have been there were it not for COVID. It probably would have continued, and it bought this subscription economy a couple more years than it probably shouldn't have had.
Okay. So, and we changed during that period, and now they're saying this is the reckoning in 25, that even Netflix, the subscription king, is facing headwinds. I haven't seen any stats on Amazon Prime, and I would like to see, like, are they facing and experiencing this as well? Because I feel like they're very bellwether on things like that. But basically, the winners, they're arguing, are going to be value-driven essential subscriptions. The losers are going to be anything that's nice to have or easily replaceable with a little bit of work to find something free. I'd love to talk about it. What I think, maybe in the context of our own subscription experience, since we've had quite a few of them, you want to kind of set the stage for that and talk about. You mentioned it briefly, but basically, why did we start? What was our experience? How do we feel about it over the last couple of years, and where are we headed now?
Sure. So we've had subscriptions across a number of different businesses. I'll use Digital Marketer because it's one that we've talked about pretty openly before. So it's kind of a lamb to slaughter, just so we're not violating any confidentiality of any of our private clients or portfolio companies. So at Digital Marketer, we had subscriptions at all different levels. So we had kind of the sub $40 subscription level, which in B2B and consumer, that's generally considered to be like breakage model pricing. So at that point, people will join, people will sign up for it, and they'll kind of hang around even if they're not using it, because it's not that much money. And so for B2B, that's kind of, 20 to 40, maybe up to 100. And for consumer, that's sort of $0 to $20, right? So that's kind of where we were living. Now, when you get north of, get into the couple hundred, so 200, 300, 500, 1,000 a month, now you're getting into consumption level. And at that point, and I think this is really, really important, if you're not a critical piece of infrastructure, if you're not considered a utility, then just about every single time we found that we would be far better just selling it as a one-time. And we went back and tried this so many different times.
Say
we
that
just
again,
never could.
I think that's a really good point people should remember. If you're not, go ahead.
Yeah, if you're not a utility, and you have to be honest with yourself about this, because the vast majority of products and services out there are in fact a nice to have. And so you think your product or service is great. And I'm sure that it is great. But most things out there are a nice to have. They're not a utility. So you're obviously the electricity coming into your home, that is a utility. Your CRM, your ERP, if you're a business.
It's kind of infrastructure, right? Like it's almost nothing consumer that I can think of off the top of my head. Almost all of that is like personal interest kind of stuff or entertainment. I can't think of
so your mobile service. Most people won't. They'll cancel their electricity before they'll cancel the cell phone plan.
Again,
right?
infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
So if we go outside of that, like cell, cable, maybe AWS, if you're a web support thing, Salesforce, your CRM, your communication, which would be everything from your cell phone to Slack and Zoom, if you're communicating those ways. Although I think that free or more usage-based alternatives to those would be, a place I'd be thinking about right now. And then whatever the core business tools that you might need that are specific to your business, if you're doing data mining or something that requires a specific kind of tool. But other than that, it's like, if you're in conveniences, you're going to have some serious challenge. If you're, we know how hard it is to do like a box, or meal kits and all of those guys just burned piles of cash. Or even if you've got essentials, but that have free alternatives, you're probably going to have some pretty significant headwinds and entertainment, right?